Did your mother or grandmother have a particular food that she made that was your favorite when you were young? If yes, please describe the food and what you liked about it.
Well, my mom was a fabulous cook. She made cream tuna on toast that I thought was to die for. And nobody likes it, but I loved it. She also made wonderful dressing, turkey dressing, and she made super meat pies. And I tried to copy them when I got married.
And they taste good today? Really?
What about you?
I remember rice pudding is one of the things that I can remember so much that my mother made. And there, besides butter and cinnamon and raisins, I mean, you sparkled up to where it was delightful. And we got to where we really enjoyed it and looked forward to it.
Oh, good. Okay, can you tell me a story about your grandparents? Anything you remember?
Well, my grandma, Fackrell, was my mother's grandma. And she did a lot of crocheting and needlework. And she always wore a thimble. And that thimble, to me, was the only reason she wore it, as far as I knew, was to tap me on the head when I didn't mind, which I'm sure I spent most of my time not minding. She'd give me thimble pie, she called it. Honey, either stop that or you'll get my thimble pie. And then the other thing oh, I forgot that. What was it? I don't know, you go.
My grandparents on my father's side lived in Croydon, and at the time that the railroad was going through, they managed a hotel up there, I remember reading about it. And grandmother's maiden name was Judd. And I recall when I was about, it was somewhere in the 1930, 32, we were taking my first trip over the trail from Hennifer into Salt Lake City, and we stopped and saw this monument sitting there. And it was for recognition of my great-grandmother being the oldest living relative, or the oldest living lady in Summit County. And she wasn't a big lady, but I only remember her a couple of times. But she made good bread. I remember she'd cut that bread off and you have a slice of bread like what you can get down here to the
Great Harvest.
Great Harvest.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is my grandma always, besides giving me thimble pie, I wore anklets in the winter, and Grandma always told me I was going to have consumption and die. And I don't even know what consumption was.
Don't ask me.
I don't think I ever got it because I was never sick. So it was all right. I had sore throats and stuff, but I didn't have anything so big as that word. My grandfather Day spoiled me rotten because I was the only girl. He had all grandsons. And he bought me my only tricycle. And then before the next baby was born after me, he was afraid it was going to be a girl, which it was. And he bought me a little tiny cedar chest. And he said, now this is for very special things. And I can just see him today telling me, I mean, a cedar chest is for special things, but I put very special things in there. He was wonderful.
All right. Okay, what kind of music did you have in your home growing up?
We had a radio, and the things that were popular in the day's time was played on the radio. But when I got to the point where I was old enough to know enough about music, in the junior high and such, we had all of the big band dance music that you knew had the words to it. We knew all the words to all the songs, never missed a dance, and it was really something that we still take part in all the time.
Did you have a favorite song?
You know, I knew them all, but one wasn't a favorite. But when you say that, one thing comes to my mind. When we were in Miles Standish in Boston, waiting to go overseas, it was the 26th day of December, right after Christmas. Don't fence me in. I remember they were playing that all the time. We were our line going ready to go into the chow line.
Bye-bye.
Well, for me, the thing, we didn't have a radio. And my grandfather had a speaker he put into through the window in our front room. He had a radio, and he'd pipe up what he had on. And that was awful. That's all I know. When that had come on, we'd turn it off.
Oh.
And we didn't want him to know that because he did play a few things. But the most thing I remember was my brother loved opera music. And when we do the Saturday cleaning, he said, "You need some culture, Marjean. We'll play this." So he'd play Beethoven and all those things.
Those were the big platters, and she ended up with a lot of them when we were first married. And boy, that was, I got to where I really appreciated operas because they were fun. We'd listen to them as we'd do things around the house with the kids.
I never did.
Okay. Do you know the story of how your parents met?
When my parents told me they met because they were dancers. And that's about all you ever did. And on 5th South, there was, to me it was the old Red Barn. But that's where they went, and they called it Hale Hall. And they would go there on Fridays and Saturdays dancing. And that's where Mother met Daddy because he was such a good dancer, she said. Well, he was. I danced with him. And that's where they met. And they danced all over, all the time.
Oh, so do we. We put on, when they used to have green and gold dance balls, they'd have floor shows, and we were in floor shows, I remember with Brad's.
Well, that's not your parents. How did they meet?
Oh, my father had a broken leg from riding in a rodeo. The horse rolled over on him, and he was on crutches, and he was introduced to my mother because he was just being employed by Union Pacific Railroad, and my Uncle Ed, Charles Edward Jury. They introduced them together, but he's on crutches.
Oh, awesome.
So is that who you're named after?
My mother, Jurey, was her maiden name.
Oh, okay. All right. How many siblings do you have?
I have 4, and I have a sister that is just a little older than I am, but she passed away at 6 weeks with whooping cough. So my daddy spoiled me too. He wasn't my father, he was my daddy. But I have 4, 2 boys and a sister.
I'm the oldest of 4 boys.
Oh.
And there's only one of the 4 that's passed away. And the other one lives in Bountiful, and the other one lives up in Green River, Wyoming.
All right. Do you have any stories about growing up in your family that influenced you or that you just remember?
Go ahead.
I don't remember reading that one, but that's all right. Stories that influenced me. Oh, yes, my dad, my brother, my oldest brother was always, his nickname was Roundy, which meant he was pretty tough. And my other brother, he didn't even want to be. And for Christmas one year, they got boxing gloves. And Max begged Dean forever to box with him. So they started in the kitchen. And Dean was so mad because he made him box him. He was hitting him like crazy, hard. And Mother kept saying, and Max would say to him, Dean, what's the matter with you? What's the matter? Leave me alone. And he was getting swatted all over. But that was the thing. We used to have boxing matches in our basement with all the neighbor kids. My brothers always had the neighbors come over and we'd make a fight ring or whatever they call those things. And in the basement on cement. So if anybody got hit and they fell over, it'd probably kill them. Mother said. And so did I.
Being the oldest, you had a lot of responsibility because you were he was the referee for the younger ones, you were the babysitter. If there were rubber guns, you had to make sure everybody was happy. If anything got broken, fixing bike tires, you just kind of looked after things because my father was, he was employed by the railroad. He was gone most of the time. And so I learned fast and it was fun and I loved it.
Great. Okay, who is the oldest relative you can recall visiting? Where and when was this visit, and what memories do you have?
Well, the last one that was older that I visited she was 101, and it was my Aunt Lucy, who lived right here in Bountiful in the 2nd Ward. They moved in 1926. We came home from the Philippines in 1991. I told her before we left that we were going on a mission to the Philippines. And she said, how long will you be gone? And I said, 1.5 years. And she says, how long's that? And I said, 18 months. She said, I can wait that long. So when I came home, the next day after we got home, I went to see her.
We went to see her.
And I kept saying to her, Aunt Lucy, it's Marjean. And she was very, very, very hard of hearing. And she kept looking at me very weird. She didn't hear what I was saying. And finally she looked at me and she said, Marjean, I told you I'd wait. So that was really quite a spiritual experience. And she died 3 weeks later at 104.
My parents were never that old. My grandparents were never that old, but then I met Marjean's grandparents, and she had a sister in Preston by the name of Pearl Allred. Was 103 or 106?
3.
She was 103 when I first met her, and we had reunions 2 or 3 times once a year. And I remember she was spry, married to a gentleman who was a judge, and I had no worry about being old when I saw how spry, what she could do.
Made the best sweet pickles ever.
Can you tell me the story of how you met your spouse, your courtship, and your wedding?
That's a long
Yeah, you can both tell
story.
your side of the
You
story.
start out, I'll finish.
Oh, you'll never finish it right.
We're still here.
Well, anyway, the way we met, I was on a float on the 4th of July. That was the Queen, and when it stopped over on 4th North on the 4th of July in 1947, I started to get off. And the wearing apparel for royalty was a bathing suit and high heels. So I had to go home, and I walked down Main Street, and he came over, helped me off the float, and then he said, can I walk you home? I said, sure. So as we walked along, he said, "Would you like to go to Lagoon?" And I said, "I'd love it. I'd love to go to Lagoon." I said, "But I have to be home by 6. And then I told a lie because I had another date, but I told him that my brother had died the year before, and that was the truth.
Killed with lightning.
He was killed with lightning on the 1st of July, a year before. And we didn't like to leave Mother home alone this time of the year. So, now that wasn't right, but the story was true. And so he said, "Well, we can be home by 6. Well, while we were there at Lagoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he said to me, "Wouldn't you like to stay and dance?" Well, you don't hear that out of a guy very often, at all, unless there's posters around saying, "Get your date for the prom," or "It's time for senior whatever day." And so anyway, I said, I'd love to. Do you like to dance?" And he said, "I'd rather dance than eat." That's it.
It was fun, and we have been to a lot of dances, and we had some great dances around here. The memory comes being with Brad's mother and dad most of the time we were dancing, and because they were professional dancers too. But we had a great time. As far as the courtship, Marjean she turned 21 on the 16th day of September. We were married on the 20th day of September in 1948. She was 4 days past 21, and I was 24 the year March before that, see. So here I was. I can remember being discharged from the service as a veteran of foreign wars with an honorable discharge, and I was 21 years old. So then I come from there in Wyoming down here to go to school, and I had seen her in the ward before a little bit, but this first time we got together.
We dated over a year before we were married. We weren't married July to September. It was a whole year in September.
Right.
So how did he propose?
I swear he never did.
What do you say, Jerry?
I just took it for granted. I just knew that she
Wait.
liked me, and I knew I didn't want anybody else. And so, anyway, we were married in the Salt Lake Temple. In those days, it was a full day. You went in from the very beginning till it was all over. We went in separate and came out as an eternal couple, and we've been looking forward to that ever since.
And we could not have pictures. You couldn't get on the grounds. So we went over and climbed the fire escape at the Deseret News building, had our picture taken on out there on the wires. That's where we had our picture taken for the paper. Newlyweds. We were on the fire escape at the Deseret. And then, you don't want to know about, we didn't have a reception. But
We just had each other.
yeah, we just did that. We're not going into that. I'll tell you that, but not the Lord.
Okay. Can you describe the house and neighborhood where you grew up? What did it look like? What color was it? And just all those little sub-questions there.
The picture right there on the wall show the house I was raised in. It was about 2 years old when we moved in, and I had been born in March, and I think we moved in before that Christmas. And it's wood. It was a nice house, one of the better ones in the city. And Uncle Ed lived with us, my mother and father, and an uncle that was the yard master. And that's about all I can remember as far as the house is concerned. We lived there. I left from the service, from that house, went all through school, living in that house.
And where was it? What city?
At Green River, Wyoming, Green River, and it had kitchen, full basement, and front room, living room, 2 bedrooms, bath. It was nice. And I remember the heating apparatus was a big furnace in the center of the house. Or you could go and you could, in the wintertime, that thing would get this red, and you'd like to stand over it, get warm. Where's this one? But it was a nice house. Yeah.
Did you share a room with your?
I did. I had the brother just young. I had a brother 16 months younger than I. That we were just grew up together, and then the 2 younger brothers. There was about 4 years between the next 2.
Right. Okay. Wait, just a couple more. Did your family eat in the kitchen or the dining room or?
We had a smaller place where we could eat in the kitchen. There was just 2 or 3, but normally and every Sunday we were always in the front room. And Mother was from the East, and she had. I don't think my mother really learned how to cook until she got married. She was one who had people doing it for her. Her father died when her mother, right after she was born, and she was raised by 2 aunties, and then this uncle Ed that was the yard master at home. They were from Ohio, the Baltimore, Ohio Railroad, and they were from back east, and so yearly we would go back. Every other year, we'd go back and visit with them, and more than once, the father and mother would send Dorland and I, my brother and I, just put a tag on us like a suitcase and give us a lunch, put us on the train. They knew all the people that worked on the train, and we didn't have to, they would see that we got transferred on the right one from Omaha to Chicago, and we'd been there once, and he says, and there was a little note that says, when you get off to Chicago, Union Pacific there, you take 2 turns, and I knew how to get the Pennsylvania train. It was about a half-block walk, and we got on that station, and then Mother's sister picked us up about 8 hours later, 6 hours later.
Can you imagine sending 2
And
children?
then the next year, the 2 brothers younger than us would go, see. And so it wasn't like today you're afraid you're going to lose them or you get robbed or somebody going to steal you or something like that. Hey, we went all the way. And she'd fix us a lunch. Now this lunch will last you. There was a couple of days in there. And I remember before we got 200 miles down the road, before we ever hit Rawlins or Cheyenne, the lunch was gone. We ate it.
His mom should have been a princess. She should have lived royal, because she was so nice and so sweet. She needed at least 1 girl and had none. He had more than just those 4 boys. He had a sister who died, and his mother had her kind of to lean on. It would have been. And yet these guys were special, and they took really good care of their mom and treated her royally. But when he said she didn't know how to cook, wasn't her fault.
No, it wasn't her.
No.
She caught on quick. She made the best cakes
She made better cake than...
She always liked to make a cake.
And was so sweet and so kind and so considerate and just a sweet lady. And she needed, well, she got a cowboy and she loved him dearly, but she needed a prince. Something royal. But anyway, that's...
Did you have anything that you remember about your house? Or?
Oh, my house was a red brick. We lived
The other
in
one?
Bountiful, and it's up there. And we had no addresses in Bountiful when I was growing up. I was 18 before we had addresses. So if I had a date, where do you live? Well, I lived 4 houses below the Clipper office. And that was a big business right on Main Street on First South, and I went down 4 houses. My address was really 72 West First South.
That's where the mailmen all park their trucks now. They tore the house down.
That was
That's right
our
on
house.
7th.
Oh, wow.
And it was red brick, and we had, And I shared a room with my baby sister. But I also shared a room with my 2 older brothers when I was really little. And I slept on a, what did they call those cots?
COT.
Okay, it was. And it had a good soft mattress, but it was a single bed, and they were over here, way over there, in a double bed. But you slept together in my day. Nobody had a single room. Didn't happen.
Okay, what pets did you have growing up, and what were their names?
I had all dogs, and their names were all Billy. Boys or girls. It didn't matter if it was a boy or a girl. Its name was Billy. And it was a black and white
Terrier.
terrier. And there's one just like it in the over here in the antique shop on 4th North.
The one that's talking in the big trophy.
Some record player. That's the way our dogs always looked. And so that was all I had.
We had a dog named Pete that was my Byron, the third, the middle brother of the 3 that were I'm older than. And he always liked the dog. And he had to run around all the time. But the rest of us, there weren't too many dogs in our neighborhood. But my brother got a horse later on, and that was the apple of his eye, and he's had a horse ever since. I think the last 3 years, the only time he hasn't owned a horse. And that's because he can't ride now.
All right, what do you remember when you went to the drugstore when you were growing up?
Well, a drugstore,
Your daddy owned it.
my dad owned the Bountiful drug here. And I knew that if I came up and looked really nice and was special and didn't make a lot of noise, my dad would give me an ice cream cone and tell me to hurry on home, honey. Mama waiting for you.
I thought this the best place to get ice cream because the dairies where we were in our town, the dairy was where the cow's milk come from, the cows and such. But I associate pharmacy with ice cream. Ice cream.
Kent?
Pills in our house, we
Hello?
never have to worry about it because she has 2 brothers that are doctors, and so
We're
I don't
being
remember anything
interviewed.
about pills. I never had
Let
to
me
learn how to
call you
spell
in
aspirin
about
till I was
20
well,
minutes. Is that
because
okay?
she took care of all of
She
all
took
the
you long.
drugs. Well, we didn't need them. We had such a healthy lifestyle, and we weren't sick. I remember the only time the kids were sick had their tonsils out. That's the only
Marianne.
time that I can remember ever
Oh, wow.
being
We're
a
being
doctor
interviewed.
while
I'll
we
call
were
you
growing
in
up.
about
Yeah,
20
the
minutes.
kids. Very, very
Bye.
fortunate. The closest probably was when Kent said he acted as a doctor when the earthquake occurred in Peru, when the earthquake killed all those people.
Mhm.
We thought we were closer to medicine then than we ever had before.
Well, that's very All right, where did you see your first movie, and what was it?
I don't think I'm going to tell you my first one. I saw Shirley Temple. She was so special. I don't know that any kids have somebody as special as Shirley Temple was to me. And of course I played with dolls till I was 10 or 12.
Mhm.
And I got a Shirley Temple doll for Christmas. I think the first movie I saw of her was Miss Marker. And my sister, my little sister, my Janice, my aunt she was little, tiny, and they had dresses that Shirley Temple wore, and Aunt Lucy would buy her Shirley Temple dresses. I never got one. That's all right. I didn't want one. I got the doll.
They had a theater in our city, in my town, where I was born in Wyoming, and I can't remember the first movie because it seemed like I saw it every week or sometimes twice a week, all the time I was growing up. And when I'd come to Salt Lake and visit grandmother, the ward had their ward movie usually on Wednesday nights, and you'd go down there. And I can remember more about those than I can the others because the others all just blurred together. They were good. I remember when it finally turned to color, and that was remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And the old Kodak or the cameras that you take the picture and like that, then pull it out and show it to you. You had to wait. Those we thought we were in that city in those days.
Yeah.
Now look what they got.
It only cost a dime to go then.
Yeah,
Whole dime.
whole dime. Yeah.
Nobody had a dime.
It
Had a
wasn't-
penny,
It wasn't hard to get.
maybe.
In our city, it wasn't hard to get a dime because the Catholic Church wasn't too far from where we lived, just a block up the street from it, and the library was there, and that library was such. And right now, at the time that Carnegie built that, Sweetwater County was bigger than the state of Ohio, so books and libraries and stuff like that were perfect in our house, in our city, and you go to the priest there, and we all know him. He called him Father Schillinger. Everybody, he knew all the kids. And they said, I want to go to the show today. Don't have a dime. He says, okay, water that strip of grass for half an hour over there, and I'll give you a dime. So anybody can get a dime anytime they wanted to go to the show.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about this wonderful library they had there. And I said, how often did you go? And he said, I've never been inside of it.
Oh, no, that's not true.
That's what you told me.
We'll
When I
edit
was,
that out.
from 6 o'clock down.
She's gonna
edit
edit
all out.
this.
Okay.
Okay. Do you recall when you first heard a radio?
I don't recall, but I remember we had one, and it seemed like in the evenings is the time we'd look. The family would be around most of the time, unless bishop meeting was on or something. Dad was gone. We'd all sit there, and it didn't seem like it had a loud. You couldn't hear it real far. You know, you hear it in the room, so everybody kind of get around it real close. But I remember hearing Roosevelt many times talk on his fireside chats or something like that, and. I remember the day that they declared war, and he told us that the day of infamy. But see, I was in the
High school.
I was in high school at that time. See, at ninth or 10th grade. So before that, it was always Mert and Marge or little something. With
Amos and Andy.
Amos and Andy, and all those things that were. But it was something that you kind of had a talking point when you were away from the house with other people that. How they're going to turn out, or Jack Armstrong sends you a badge and a code and everybody, and you know, all that kind of. It was fun. It was something that united a lot of the kids.
All right. Okay. Describe how you keep your testimony of Jesus Christ growing.
By doing service, sharing it, and reading scripture often. And I sometimes try to memorize. And I can memorize a lot of things, but scripture has just been beyond me. But I do try to serve and show love during this service and share.
Your testimony grows as you share it, and you don't have to share it with everybody. And sometimes you can talk to yourself. You can share it with yourself as you go, because different things on different days, on different occasions, strengthen it. And you had the opportunity when serving as in a bishopric to sometimes 4 times a year you were given the opportunity that you had to fulfill, and that's the way it grows. And listening to other people, and we've been in the temple now on the 12th day of August. It'll be completed 28 years as an ordinance worker, And there's a dozen times a day you hear and share and can feel, and testimonies grow as you get close to people and you see them see the light, and you can see the glow that comes through them, especially those for the first time when they receive their endowment. How great it really fills you. Makes you feel good. Makes you feel great.
My Aunt Lucy was a great example to me too. And I think you can look to older people, older members of your family. But Aunt Lucy could not hear, and she was 104, but she never did not have a temple recommend. That was the most important thing in her purse, was a temple recommend. She always had it. The bishop knew when it would expire, because it was on her birthday, August 1st. And he would come by her home, because she wouldn't be to church. She always went with my mom for years. Didn't go to her own ward. But she always carried a temple recommend and told me how important it was.
You've had one since we were married.
Oh, I don't want it to expire.
We won't let it.
I want it to be active.